Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Weekly for Saturday, November 13th, 2021. And our top story today, how to navigate your nutrition during the holiday season. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Tara Starbuck. She's a nutritionist with Nutrition HealthWorks. Tara, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. And I want to talk nutrition because a lot of us, maybe I wouldn't say post-COVID, but, COVID's going to be there and still lingering. But some of us are planning to travel out to family and friends and restaurants for the Thanksgiving holidays and Christmas and New Year's holidays. I want to give people some advice and things they need to be thinking about. What are you talking to clients about in terms of holiday preparations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things we talk about is just how to maintain your goals and continue some of those strides clients have made already towards their wellness goals without having to feel like they're starting over. And so,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. We talk a little bit about balancing their plate. So how to make sure to include vegetables or good complex carbohydrates, or maybe how to get back into their routine after a holiday weekend.
Yeah, and what are some of the dangers? I don't even know dangers is the right word, but what are some of the fallacies or things that put us at risk for not hitting our goals? Thanksgiving, I think of pumpkin pie, I think of stuffing, I think of great vegetables too, and I think of my mom's great turkey. What are things that we need to be thinking about in order to maybe give ourselves a little bit of a break here?
Yeah, I think it's one thing to enjoy the day, live in the moment, be mindful about the tasty food you're having. But sometimes people can let that continue to snowball into their work week. We joke that there's time between the holidays. So it even starts with Halloween, whether or not we realize that, right? And so we joke between, the weeks between Halloween, then to Thanksgiving, then to Christmas, we're not always productive at work. We're just waiting until the new year starts to, quote, get back on the wagon, right? So some of those dangers include just giving up on your goals or not building, keeping that strong foundation of what you've spent this entire year, maybe 2-3 years building, right? The wellness goals for yourself. So it can just lead to, poor habits, whether or not we call them, bad habits, but, lack of water intake. Our schedule is different than it was before. So we may not be getting as much sleep. We may be stressed and, we're traveling and that tension can continue to propel through our work and just home life, even after the holidays.
Really, really good points. And I think having that perspective, you don't have to be perfect that day, but just to know that you have to have balance. What are some things we need to think about if we're going out to a restaurant for Thanksgiving or we're going to someone's house maybe we haven't gone to before in terms of the preparation? Everyone seems to have a different family tradition, cooking a fried turkey as opposed to a traditional turkey or other types of food. What do we need to keep in mind?
I think one of the most important things is just having a plan. And so I know I always try to inquire because like you mentioned, my husband's family gatherings are never the same year to year. So just because maybe one year we have the traditional, like you're saying, Thanksgiving turkey with the sides and desserts and pies. The next year we may only do desserts, or the next year we may only do appetizers. And so it changes every year. So just inquiring like, hey, what's the menu going to look like if you're not the one in charge? So you can plan for it. I tell my clients all the time, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this also can apply to that day. It doesn't mean that we're going to be super strict, counting our calories, saying no to all the pies. But if you have an idea of, okay, there's going to be pumpkin pie and chocolate pie, which do you prefer? So you're not there in the moment like, oh no, what do I do? I'm just going to say no to both. And then the holiday passes us by and we haven't even enjoyed it, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I'll take one of each. I think that's important.
And let me ask you a question. Too.
That is a plan. That is a plan. And then afterwards, get on the rowing machine for about 2 hours to burn those calories off.
Yeah.
But is it rude to ask your host if there's some dishes that you can bring?
I don't think so at all, right? I mean, and you can come at it in that perspective of, hey, I'd love to help, right? Not, and it doesn't have to be like, hey, what are you serving? So I can kind of have a plan. It doesn't have to, come from a negative light. It can definitely be, hey, I'd love to help you take some of the pressure off. What can I contribute? And I'm always in the wheelhouse of, even if they say no, I'll still bring, you can't go wrong with a veggie appetizer, whether you're doing like hummus and peppers and grape tomatoes with pita, or just a traditional veggie like baby carrots and broccoli, just an easy, simple veggie platter that you can pick up from a Harris Teeter already made, or a great salad. What are they going to do? Tell you no? So I always try to come with something, and most of the time it's always veggies, because as we know, we can name tons of carb side dishes that are included with Thanksgiving and Christmas meals, but I always try to fill in that gap. And yes, I play up the I'm a dietitian, so what else would I bring kind of joke, but I think it also can be very helpful for the host.
Last question, Tara. What are your favorite holiday dishes? If you don't mind me asking, do you enjoy stuffing? Do you enjoy turkey, cranberry sauce? What is your go-to?
Yeah, I love definitely turkey. We make ham typically for Christmas, so I'll say turkey for Thanksgiving. And I love some maple glazed carrots with bacon. One of my favorites, of course, green beans and roasted Brussels sprouts. And this past year, I made so I may bring it back, but I made a pumpkin pie with Oreo crust. So that was special.
That sounds special. I think after this conversation and people watching this, people are going to be heading out to have lunch a little bit early, and it's only 7:30 in the morning. Tara, we're going to have to leave it there. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for sharing some of your insight, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tara. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And when we come back, we'll take a look at some of our best segments for the week. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. On Monday, I sit down with Consumer Reports' Chuck Bell to learn how to avoid overpaying for that car loan. Let's take a look.
It's very significant, and it's been increasing in recent years. We used to have a rule that said you should put 20% of the cost of the car as down payments, take a 4-year loan, and income or your payments should make up no more than 10% of the cost of car ownership. Right now, people are paying on average 11% just for car payments alone, and then they have additional payments for gas, repairs, and insurance. Some people are paying as much as 14% of their income for car payments, and there's a 50% higher risk of default when you get up that high. So one of the reasons this has been happening is the price of new cars has been going up. And so people are paying about, on average, 25% more for car payments now for new cars than they did 10 years ago. And many people are taking longer 6 and 7 year loans, and that's also a concern. Well, I think one thing about cars that's so important is many people rely on them to get to their job to earn their paycheck, right? So they're very central to your economic welfare. But I think as costs gradually creep up, not everybody realizes that it's taking a bigger bite out of your income. And so sometimes people are buying more car than they can afford. And it's kind of hard to put your foot down and say, no, I'm not going to buy the newest car, or I'm going to save up for longer. I'm going to put down 20% down payments. We're seeing people putting down less and less. And then the consequence is maybe you're going to be underwater on your loan. You're going to owe more than the car is actually worth, because the car is a unique type of asset that starts depreciating right the moment you drive it off the lot, right? So every day that you own it, it's worth less, and yet you're still obligated to pay on that loan. So this is the challenge that consumers are facing. We've just done this big investigation where we examined a portfolio of 858,000 car loans that were made in the United States. And what we found surprised us a bit, that interest rates really don't necessarily track that closely with their creditworthiness. And so we could say that car lending is not a terribly efficient market, that many people are overpaying on their car loans to the tunes of tens of billions in excess interest every year. So for example, we found even with people who have prime and super prime credits, some were getting interest rates over 10%, some got an interest rate as high as 25%. And we found this to be just really shocking. But if you consider the way that cars are sold, dealers make a lot of their money from the financing part of the transaction. And over 80% of consumers get their financing through the dealer. They don't bring their own bank loan or their own credit union loan. About 20% do that. And so that's one of the problems, is the peculiar way that the financing is arranged. The dealer sends out the consumer's application and credit score information to some lenders that they choose, and then they get offers back from those dealers, from those lenders, and they can mark up the offer by 1 or 2% in profit for the dealer. So right off the bat, consumer might be getting a 1 or 2% increase over what they would get if they brought their own bank or credit union financing. So this is the thing that consumers really have to start to pay closer attention to. We're calling on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to study these interest rate discrepancies and see what they can do in terms of promulgating guidelines or rules to make sure that the consumer is getting a rate that tracks their creditworthiness. We think that's really important. People are not economists or financial experts in most cases. It's hard for customers to really dig into the details of these things, but we think there could be stronger guardrails to make sure that people get competitive rates for financing. Also, many states do set a usury ceiling of 25%. Or 17% in some states. But the problem is those are still very high rates for people. And so usually the usury cap, it's important, and states could be doing more to bring down the rates. But right now those caps are set at a pretty high level. When you're shopping for a car, you can try to prepare yourself financially for what you're going to be taking on. So one thing is to just know what your credit score is. And you can get a free copy of your credit report from each of the three major national credit reporting agencies for free through April 2022, right now through Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So that's a good way to review where you stand. If you have any outstanding debts, you can pay them down. If there's mistakes on your credit report, you can get them corrected. That will usually take you 1 to 2 months if you're lucky. Sometimes it takes much longer than that. So that would be one key step people should take, is know what your credit score is, know what you can qualify for. Also try to save up a larger down payment and put more down in the transaction, so you'll be able to take a shorter term for a loan. And then you'll have less risk of being underwater in the loan and owing more than the car is worth.
And on Wednesday, I sat down with the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's Fernando Martin to learn about how widespread are price increases. Let's take a look.
They're quite widespread, and they're getting more widespread as time goes on. Part of the problem is that when the pandemic hit, a lot of prices actually went down, like energy, because of a collapse in demand. That brought prices down, and then they started coming up. And now they're higher than pre-pandemic. So you have to be mindful of that, right? That it's not just the recent increases, but relative to where we were before this hits, and there's a lot of movements. We all heard about lumber prices. They went up, but then they came down. So I think the way to look at things now that kind of most of the kind of ups and downs happened is to compare where we are now relative to where we were pre-pandemic. And there what you see is that, yes, there are some prices that have grown kind of in a very significant way, right? So if you look at used cars, for example, they've grown quite a lot. But if you go outside those kind of headline grabbing numbers, what you see is that, food has gone up. As I mentioned before, energy has moved up. But things like services have increased as well. Maybe perhaps not as much as these headline grabbing numbers, but for sure the rate at which they're increasing over time has accelerated some, and that's basically explaining why we see an increase in inflation. I like to point out that every time you read an article on those ships blocking the view in the coast, the article invariably starts showing you how many ships there are, how long it takes for the materials to get unloaded, et cetera, et cetera. And then somewhere in the article, they mention, by the way, we're having record, shipments, and people are buying all this stuff. So what does that tell you? That everything we did for COVID kind of contributes to making this more difficult, right? There's, perhaps less people working in the relevant services to, import those goods. And there are some mitigation strategies that make that, kind of more prolonged. But on the other hand, we're buying a lot of stuff. And, there's one simple example. When the pandemic hit, what happened? Everyone, a lot of people went on lockdown. They started working from home. People realized, I don't have a webcam at home. So we all went and bought webcams. It turns out there were only so many. They ran out, so you started to wait. And, that took a while, but you can imagine how something like that can happen to many other goods when we all kind of start buying the same things. Now, that's kind of driven by the pandemic, but a lot of the demand right now is also being driven by the fact that we've been sending checks to people, right? So when you look at one of the features of the pandemic was that personal income went up. Why? Because the government kind of took this approach of, we're not going to start, saying you need money or this other person needs money, because it's very confusing. We don't know who's working at home, who really needs, who's getting fired, who's not. I mean, it was very complicated. So they decided just to say blanket. If you make less than this much money, you just get a check. So I didn't get one. People did get, my girlfriend got checks because she's a teacher. So what happens? Well, if you somehow you stop going out, you didn't have as many dinners, etc. You started saving, and if you started saving, at some point you realize, well, it's nice, perhaps now a nice time to buy a new TV or to upgrade your furniture or to improve your home office, etc., etc. So that has led to kind of a surge in demand, especially for durables, and that's one of the things that struck me the most, which is you look at the data, you see these price increases, but then you see the quantities being bought and they go up, they don't go down. So it's not like, oh, things are getting more expensive and we cut down on those. No, we're buying more of those things, which tells you that part of the story, and perhaps a fundamental part of this story, is that the demand for certain goods has surged. Okay, and that, of course, production takes a while to catch up. So the way producers deal with that surge in demand is to increase prices. And a lot of what you see in durable goods is driven by just a surge in demand. I mean, I will point at the example of chips. I mean, it's true that, so there's so like automakers, they have a timing issue. They delayed kind of producing new cars, so they didn't buy the chips on time, and now they're scrambling to get them. But a lot of the other stuff is being driven by pure demand. Okay, so everyone is upgrading their computers. People are mining for Bitcoin, so they're buying chips. Zoom needs, like the medium we're using now, they needed to create all these servers so that we can host all these meetings. So they also needed chips. So part of it is, like I said, is the government sending money to people. The other thing is the transformation of the way we work made us have, change also the way we live, right? So now you have a home office on top of perhaps your business office. So you need to buy the stuff so that you can do it effectively. Part of the suddenness of the shock, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, initially prices actually went down. Not for every good, just on average, right? So you look at the price level, it was growing at something close to 2%. The pandemic hit, it dropped. Okay, and then it started growing, and then it grew faster than it used to. That's what we call inflation, right? The rate of growth of the price level. So it's not inevitable that it had to happen in that particular way. I mean, a lot of it is driven by the idiosyncrasies of this particular pandemic, the way it hit, the way we managed it, and the way we came out of it. And of course, it interacts with not just these transitory measures, but also the transformation, which is permanent, right? So I don't see working from home leaving us anytime soon. Perhaps it will converge in a slightly different version than the one we have now, but we're not going to go back to the same world we had before. Planning for this, they were already expecting a transition towards more working from home. It's just, the pandemic kind of gave an impulse to do it all at once rather than over a decade. What I would say that is perhaps self-inflicted is the way we dealt with it was through a massive fiscal expansion. And that typically leads to inflation, right? Not necessarily. It didn't happen during the great financial crisis, and that's always a good benchmark to have in mind. But, the reality was also different. The type of crisis we had was different. The amount of debt being bought by, foreigners was also different. And that helped kind of alleviate inflationary pressures. Whereas this time around, it's kind of more of a textbook example of, the government, sending, money to people, them spending it. So, more money buying the same number of goods, that drives the price up. So if you don't have to be an economist to understand that, I think. So in that sense, part of the response also created the inflation, and we'll see how this unravels over time.
Well, certainly great segments. I want to thank all of our wonderful contributors this week. And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited, and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.